My name is Elizabeth Rollins. Most people just called me Beth. I'm 59 years old, and for over 3 decades, I served in the United States Army, 20 of those years in special operations, 10 in command, and nearly all of them in silence. Silence was my armor, my duty, and, for a long time, my exile. Last month, I stood behind a chain-link fence at the Rollins family legacy ceremony, watching as my father, my brother, and my niece took the stage, one after another, honoring our family's generations of distinguished service. The same service I gave my life to. The same flag I bled for. I wasn't invited. In fact, I was specifically told not to come. "It's a family event," my cousin texted. And after everything, you know how Dad feels. That everything was a single decision I made 15 years ago in Syria, one they never asked about, and one I never explained. They called me a disgrace, said I abandoned the chain of command. They stripped my photo from the family wall and left my name out of the honor roll. That day, I didn't come for applause. I just wanted to see it once, what it looked like to be remembered. But then it happened. The ground began to tremble, not from music, but from engines. A convoy of military Humvees rolled in like thunder, and when the black SUV door opened, the highest-ranking officer in the region stepped out, looked straight at me, and saluted. "Welcome back, General Rollins," he said. And just like that, my name echoed louder than their silence ever did. The Rollins family didn't just serve. They built a brand around it. Our living room back home in Charlottesville looked more like a military museum than a home. Framed photos lined every wall. My grandfather in World War II with General Bradley, my uncle during Vietnam, my father in Desert Storm, and, of course, my younger brother, Mark, in his West Point dress whites, smiling like he'd been carved from tradition itself. At one point, my photo was up there too, a black and white print taken the day I received my first commission. Hair tucked neatly under my cap, jaw squared, eyes steady. It hung 2 frames over from my brother's, slightly lower because, as my father once said, rank goes from left to right, seniority before sentiment. I used to be proud of that wall. Not for the medals or the posture, but because it meant I belonged. But one day, my photo was gone. No announcement, no argument, just replaced, silently, with a watercolor painting of a bald eagle. As if my service had been traded for symbolism. I didn't confront anyone. I just noticed. Later that year, I attended what would be my final family dinner. It was Mark's promotion celebration. He had just made full colonel, and my father had invited the entire extended family. The table was set for 14, each place marked with printed name cards in elegant gold script. Colonel Mark Rollins, Captain Jennifer Rollins, Lieutenant Sam Rollins, even Dr. Benjamin Rollins, for my cousin who never served a day but married a Navy dentist. My card simply read, Beth. No rank, no acknowledgement. Just a first name in lowercase, tucked between a water glass and a salad fork at the far end of the table, next to the coat rack and an extra chair used when the dog wandered in. I remember glancing at the head of the table. My father sat tall, polished, beaming with pride as guests toasted my brother's achievements. "To Mark," someone said, "for carrying the Rollins name with honor." I raised my glass too, out of habit. No one noticed. Not once during the dinner did my father speak to me. He asked my cousin about her deployment, congratulated my niece on her naval scholarship, and recounted a story from Mark's first combat assignment. I passed him the butter. He didn't say thank you. I stood to refill my water. He looked the other way. It was like I had become a ghost in my own bloodline. After dessert, apple pie, the same recipe my mom used to make before she passed. I stood to help clear the plates. Old habits die hard. No one offered to assist. My brother was halfway into a cigar, and my cousins had already migrated to the living room. I stacked the dishes, ran the hot water, dried my hands on the same towel from years ago, and turned to Mark. "I think I'm going to head out." He nodded without looking up. "Thanks for coming." No hug, no eye contact, no walk to the door. As I passed my father on the way out, He shifted slightly in his chair, turning away. Like even my silhouette was too much to bear. 2 weeks later, I learned through a friend at the Department of Veterans Affairs that my name had been quietly removed from the Rollins Family Honor Registry, the brass plaque my father had custom mounted in his study hallway. The space where my name had once been engraved now read, "Reserved for future service." Not removed, not revised, just erased. And that was the moment I realized. My punishment wasn't just military, it was familial. My fall wasn't from grace, but from memory. I drove home that night in silence, the kind that doesn't settle. It stretches. All I could think was, they didn't need to tell me I didn't belong. They just needed to stop saying I ever had. Most people think the hardest part of losing your rank is losing the title. But for me, it wasn't the stars on my shoulder. It was the silence that came after. When I joined Special Operations, I understood what I was signing up for. Missions that didn't make headlines, orders that came in the middle of the night. Success meant no one ever knowing what you did. I didn't want parades, I wanted impact. I led extraction units into places the news couldn't pronounce. I negotiated with ghosts, navigated through politics wrapped in camo, and I was good at it. Until Syria. It was February 2011. We had boots on the ground outside a small village west of Aleppo. The objective was simple on paper: confirm suspected weapons stockpile, secure the perimeter, and exfiltrate by nightfall. But less than 30 minutes in, everything changed. The building marked on our intel as a weapons cache had no arms, no bunkers. Instead, we found school desks, broken chalkboards, a mural of flowers painted across the back wall. It wasn't a hideout. It was a converted school, turned into something far worse. In the basement, we found 42 children, some sedated, some barely conscious, all being used as shields. I requested immediate evac. Radio silence. We were told to hold position, a phrase I had heard before. A delay disguised as protocol, but I knew the truth. No help was coming. Later, I'd learned the village was under quiet protection from a foreign militia, one of our allies' paramilitary assets. The State Department had approved non-intervention in exchange for regional oil route intelligence. In plain English, we weren't supposed to be there, and if things went wrong, we'd be denied. So I made a choice. I split our team into two, one to hold the perimeter, the other to get those kids out. There were no protocols for what we did. No rules for how to disarm a building wired with IEDs and screams. My team followed me without hesitation. We carried children wrapped in jackets, stepping over tripwires and navigating gunfire from rooftops disguised as homes. 3 of my soldiers were injured. 1 nearly lost his leg. But we got every child out. By the time we reached the safe zone, I had already sent the after-action report. No spin, no excuses. I wrote exactly what happened, exactly why I didn't wait. The response? Nothing. The mission was reclassified, the report sealed. And when I asked about commendations for my unit, I was told, "Ma'am, we've decided not to pursue further documentation at this time." That's military speak for, you embarrassed someone who outranks you. 1 week later, I received a formal conduct review, failure to follow chain of command. No court-martial, no hearing, just quiet administrative exile. And I accepted it. Not because I believed I'd done wrong, but because I knew the truth would never survive the headlines, and because dragging those kids into public view would have turned their trauma into my defense. I took the fall, so they wouldn't have to. I signed the NDA. I stepped back from command. I turned down interviews. Promotions vanished. My calendar filled with quiet reassignment and awkward smiles. At first, I thought the silence would pass, that someone would ask, "What really happened?" But no one did. Not my commanders, not my brother, not even my father. What hurt most wasn't being judged. It was being ignored. Because in the Rollins family, there was no room for nuance. You either followed orders, or you were the problem. And to them, I'd made my choice. But here's what they never understood. I didn't disobey to be a hero. I disobeyed because 42 children were going to die. And when you're standing in front of that kind of truth, there's no protocol worth following. I thought the silence from command would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The silence from home cut deeper. I remember the night I called my father, not to plead, just to be the one to tell him before someone else did. I told him calmly that I had received a conduct review for disobeying orders and that I accepted the consequences. There was a pause on the line, maybe 5 seconds long. Then he said, "I taught you to follow the chain of command, Beth, not rewrite it." That was it. No questions, no curiosity, no, "Are you all right?" He hung up. 2 weeks later, my name was scrubbed from the family's military registry. The polished wooden plaque outside my father's study used to list every Rollins who served. Mine had been there, right under his, for 18 years. It was now replaced with a new brass tag, reserved for future service. It was as if I had died, and they were saving the spot for someone more worthy. What made it worse? My brother Mark had just received a new assignment, one that I had vacated. He never brought it up, never asked if I was okay stepping aside, never once looked me in the eye and said, "I know how you got here." Maybe he thought I deserved it. Or maybe he liked how clean the silence made things. I still showed up to a few family events, birthdays, holidays. I tried. But whenever I walked into a room, the air shifted. My aunts smiled politely, then turned away. My cousins nodded from across the space, but never came closer. Conversations changed when I approached, like I was a virus they didn't know how to contain. One Memorial Day, my father stood at the grill, beer in hand, giving a toast. To the men and women in this family who have brought us pride and service. He listed names, Mark, Uncle Henry, even my cousin's husband, who delivered mail for the Coast Guard. He skipped mine. It wasn't a mistake. After that day, I stopped trying. I stopped calling. I stopped chasing connection where none existed. Invitations stopped coming. News traveled to me secondhand, if at all. I found out my niece had her first child through a coworker who saw it on Facebook. I wasn't invited to the baby shower. I wasn't mentioned in the announcement. I had become a ghost with the same last name. Eventually, I left Virginia and bought a small patch of land in Montana. It wasn't much, a broken fence, an overgrown garden, and a barn that leaned like it was too tired to stand. But it was mine. No brass plaques, no expectations, just space. I started waking with the sun, learned how to fix irrigation lines, patch rotted wood, and chase off raccoons with a flashlight and a shovel. The work was quiet, repetitive, honest. And slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Not the decorated officer, not the disgraced daughter, just Beth. A woman who had once done something hard and right, and had been left alone for it. I kept a box under my bed. Medals, patches, old ID cards. I didn't open it, not out of shame, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Sometimes I still dreamed about Syria, the smell of diesel, the way one of the children clung to my leg and wouldn't let go. I never remembered their faces, just the weight of their bodies in my arms, and the sound of boots hitting the ground behind me, covering our escape. Those memories never left me, but neither did the absence. Because what no one tells you about being erased is that it doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, meal by meal, photo by photo, until you look around and realize you're the only one who still remembers who you used to be. The invitation didn't come in an envelope. It came as a text, from my cousin Rachel. "Hey, just FYI, big family legacy ceremony this fall. Grandpa's idea. It's gonna be a whole thing. Mark's giving the keynote. Thought you'd want to know." There was no RSVP link, no details, no "you're welcome to attend." Just a breadcrumb of information, tossed in my direction like an afterthought. Still, I checked the official site, the Rollins Family Military Legacy Ceremony, honoring 3 generations of service. There it was, my father's name in bold, Mark's bio front and center. Even Rachel's husband, who'd done 2 non-combat years in Germany, had a spot listed as a featured guest speaker. I scrolled to the bottom. Disclaimer: due to the formal nature of this event, we kindly ask that guests refrain from inviting individuals whose service has been subject to disciplinary review. It wasn't even subtle. I wasn't hurt. Not in the way you'd expect. I didn't want a seat at the front. I didn't want a medal or a microphone. But to be erased again, so publicly, so deliberately, that I couldn't ignore, not for myself, not for the soldiers who followed my order that day, and not for the 42 children whose names never made it into any file. So I filed a formal request through the Department of Defense. Not to challenge the event, not to demand a correction, just for 45 minutes. I requested temporary declassification of the Syria mission. Enough to allow a record, not for the press, not for the public, just for truth. It took weeks, 4 layers of clearance, 2 interviews, 3 new NDAs, but eventually it was granted. 45 minutes, on site, no cameras, no distribution, no copies. I told no one, not my father, not Mark, not even Rachel. Instead of flying, I took the train. I arrived the night before, stayed in a motel 2 exits away, and walked the final few blocks the morning of. Wore a clean navy button-down, dark jeans, no ribbons, no insignia. Just me. At the gate, a young man in uniform held a clipboard. Name? Elizabeth Rollins. He scanned the list, flipped one page, then another. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not registered. I'm not asking for a seat, I said. I'll stay outside the perimeter. He glanced over his shoulder at a woman with a headset and a clipboard. She shook her head. We've been instructed to deny access to unregistered individuals, I nodded. Understood. No anger, no protest, just acknowledgement. I stepped away from the path and found a spot behind the low iron fence, halfway down the east side of the park. It wasn't a great view, but I wasn't there to watch. I was there to witness. Rows of chairs were set up in perfect lines. Flags fluttered behind the podium, wrapped in red, white, and blue. A small marching band tuned under a tent. My father was already seated up front. Mark paced behind the podium, rehearsing his speech. No one noticed me, and I liked it that way. The ceremony began with the mayor's welcome, then a reading of the Roll of Honor. They called every name I knew, some twice. My brother's name echoed with applause. Mine never came. And yet, I stood still, hands folded, because I knew something they didn't. 45 minutes had just begun. The ground trembled, soft at first, like thunder far off. Some guests turned to look. Engines. Big ones. Then the convoy came. 20 Humvees in full formation, American flags rippling on each side. No music, no announcements. Dust curled behind them like smoke trailing memory. They rolled to a stop with silent precision. Then the black SUV pulled forward. The door opened, and out stepped General Thomas Braxton, 4 stars on his shoulders, face unreadable. He didn't greet the crowd, didn't shake hands, didn't look at my brother. He walked straight toward the fence, toward me, stopped 3 feet away, and saluted. Welcome back, General Rollins. The field held its breath. Then, from the back, a young man stepped forward. Maybe 25. Suit wrinkled, shoes dusty. In his hand, a folded letter. I'm Dr. Sami Khalil, he said. I was born in Aleppo. In 2011, I was 5 when I was taken, along with 41 other children, by armed men who didn't care if we lived or died. The crowd fell silent. American soldiers found us. They were ordered to wait, but one woman didn't. He turned to me. She carried me out, wrapped me in her jacket, told me I'd be okay. That woman was General Elizabeth Rollins. A wave moved through the crowd. My brother went pale. My father sat stiff, eyes locked on Sammy. I became a doctor because someone disobeyed protocol to save me. For years I never knew who, until I saw a document that was never supposed to be read. He unfolded the note. My sister, who passed last year, wrote this. To the woman with strong arms, thank you for choosing us when no one else did. I don't remember your face, but I remember feeling safe. No one clapped. They just stood still. Behind me, I heard my father shift. When I turned, he was looking at me, not as a general, not as a disgrace, but as his daughter. He gave a single nod. No words. But I felt them anyway. That night I returned home. No headlines, no spotlight, just quiet. The next morning, I made 2 mugs of coffee and pulled out the old chair on the porch. I set it beside mine, facing forward, not toward me. I didn't know if he'd ever show up, but I made space. Because sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a second chair, a warm cup, and the silence we no longer fear.